Hello and welcome to CVR English. This is Pravalika. Let's get into the details. US President Donald Trump has claimed that India has assured him it will stop importing oil from Russia, a statement that has ignited widespread debate amid ongoing global tensions over energy trade and sanctions imposed on Moscow. Trump's assertion highlights the increasing international pressure on India to reduce its reliance on Russian energy as a part of broader efforts to isolate Russia economically. Due to the conflict in Ukraine, however, the Indian government has not officially confirmed this assurance, emphasizing the need to balance energy security and economic interest while navigating complex geological dynamics.
Reporters at the White House, Trump said he was not happy with India importing oil from Russia, which Washington views as indirectly financing the conflict in Ukraine.
Russia should have won in the first week, and they're going into the fourth year, and I want to see it stop. So I was not happy that India was buying oil, and he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. They will, within a short period of time, they will not be buying oil from Russia, and they'll go back to Russia after the war's over.
Trump emphasized that India's move to stop buying Russian oil would help end the conflict in Ukraine, adding that New Delhi's normal trade relations with Moscow could resume once the war is over. Even though the US President claimed that he spoke to Prime Minister Modi today, the last known conversation between the two leaders took place on the 9th of October when Prime Minister Modi congratulated Trump on the success of the Gaza peace plan. India responded to the US President's statement and underlined that safeguarding the interests of its consumers remains New Delhi's top priority. MEA spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal also stressed that ensuring stable energy prices and secured supplies have been the twin goals of India's energy policy. He noted that New Delhi is expanding its energy procurement with the US over the past decade. However, the MEA is yet to comment on Trump's claim that Prime Minister Modi promised him to stop purchasing oil from Russia. Trump in August has raised tariffs on Indian exports to the United States to 50%, with Trump's aides accusing India of fueling Russia's war in Ukraine. In his White House remarks, Trump lauded Prime Minister Modi as a great man and a seasoned leader. However, he soon made some loose remarks, prompting him to clarify himself.
Great. He reported to me that he's a great man, you know. Modi is a great man. That he loves Trump. Now, I don't know if the word love, I don't want you to take that any different. I don't want to destroy his political career.
In a significant diplomatic development, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted Syrian political leader Farag al-Shara in Moscow, fueling speculation about potential shifts in Syria leadership landscape. This meeting comes amid ongoing uncertainty surrounding Russian steadfast support for President Bashar al-Assad. Analysts suggest that engagement with al-Shara may signal Russia's exploration of alternative political options in Syria as it seeks to maintain influence in the region, while addressing evolving geopolitical challenges.
Putin called parliamentary elections in Syria a big success for Syria. Putin emphasized that Moscow has always been led by interests of the Syrian people. Ahmad al-Shara, on the other hand, vowed to redefine Russia-Syria relations and pledged to honor all the past agreements.
Many strategic and political relations, both regional and international, are closely linked to Russia. We respect all past agreements and this rich history, and we are working to redefine the nature of these relations.
While economic investment, status of Russian military bases in Syria, and of course the issue of de-arming the new Syrian military were among the several issues on the agenda during the meeting. Al-Shara is also likely to have asked Russia to hand over individuals who committed war crimes and are in Russia, most notably former President Bashar al-Assad. Now, Russia was a key ally of Bashar al-Assad during the 14-year Syrian civil war and provided diplomatic and military support to Assad. However, he was toppled in a lightning offensive led by the interim president Ahmad al-Shara. Russia's naval base in Tartus and its air base at Hyman were Moscow's only official military outposts outside the former Soviet Union. Russia has used these bases extensively during its intervention in the Syrian civil war on Assad's side in 2015, with heavy air bombardments of rebel-held areas. Now, despite Moscow's long-standing alliance with Assad, the new Syrian regime led by al-Shara has sought peaceful relations with Russia. In July, Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shara
US President Donald Trump sparked controversy after mistakenly referred to India as Iran during a speech reflecting on his previous trade policies while discussing the impositions of tariffs and his dealings with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Trump accidentally mentioned Iran instead of India, leading to widespread attention and criticism. The slip-up added to the series of verbal missteps by the former president and stirred reactions from political commemorators and public alike, highlighting the sensitivity of diplomatic relations between the countries involved.
Our trade war with China, but he launched into a big defense of his tariffs, claiming it helped keep peace and end wars worldwide. Trump sought to emphasize that his tariff threat towards India and Pakistan was instrumental in preventing the conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. In this process, however, he mixed up India and Iran, saying he was negotiating a deal with Iran when he actually meant India. Listen to this.
We don't have tariffs. We're not going to have national security. As an example, if you look at Pakistan and Iran, I told them I was in the midst of negotiating a trade deal with Iran, and Pakistan was going to be in line. And because of tariffs, they all want to negotiate much differently. We're making a good deal. And then I heard that they're shooting at each other. And I said during one of my conversations, are you guys going to go to war? Two nuclear powers. We are thinking about, I said, here's the deal. You go to war, I'm going to put a 200% tariff. I'm going to stop you from doing any business in the United States. I said it to both of them. Within 24 hours, the war.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has urged for comprehensive diplomatic measures to safeguard South Korean citizens in Cambodia following the tragic case of a university student who was reportedly lured by a scam ring and allegedly tortured to death. The president emphasized the urgent need for stronger cooperation and intervention to prevent such incidents and ensure the safety and security of nationals abroad. This call's action highlights growing concerns over the welfare of citizens entangled in overseas criminal activities.
22-year-old, a South Korean student who arrived in Cambodia on July 17, 2025.
Well, Seoul has now banned travel to several parts of Cambodia, including Poipet and Kampot, while dispatching a team of high-level officials to help nationals lured into working in scam compounds and secure the release of those held against their will. Just last Friday, South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Yoon summoned the Cambodian ambassador in Seoul to protest the death of the student, which is being linked to an employment scam in Cambodia. Cho's ministry notes that nearly 80 South Koreans who were possible victims of fake jobs or even scam centers remain unaccounted for in Cambodia at present. Between the month of January and August this year, over 300 South Koreans were reported to have gone missing or been held against their will after entering Cambodia. The number of kidnappings or confinement rose to 220 last year, a stark rise from just 17 in 2023. In fact, many reportedly lured there by fraudulent job offers promising high wages. Also concerning is the threat factor from China, with over economic coercion and ongoing security concerns that have led to a rise of anti-China sentiment in Seoul.
Male, 22-year-old, a South Korean student who arrived in Cambodia on July 17, 2025.
Well, Seoul has now banned travel to several parts of Cambodia, including Poipet and Kampot.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent a firm message to global powers, emphasizing that any peace agreement between Israel and other nations will not affect South Africa's ongoing genocide case at the International Court of Justice. Ramaphosa reaffirmed his country's commitment to pursuing justice and accountability. underscoring that diplomatic developments will not deter South Africa from seeking legal recourse for alleged atrocities. The stance reflects Pretoria's determination to uphold international law and human rights, irrespective of shifting geopolitics and landscapes.
Its counter memorial containing its response to South Africa's main arguments after concluding the first phase of the hostage swap on Monday, in which 20 living Israeli hostages were released by Hamas in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Trump appealed for a phase 2 of the ongoing negotiations between Israel and Gaza. Now, the US president said the job is not done and added that the dead have not been returned as promised. As of now, major uncertainties remain as key issues, including when Hamas will return the bodies of all hostages believed dead, and Israel's demand that a weakened Hamas should disarm. These core issues, they still remain unresolved, along with the core issue of whether there will be a Palestinian state. Its counter memorial containing its response to South Africa's main arguments after concluding the first phase of the hostage swap on Monday, in which 20 living Israeli hostages were released by Hamas in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Trump appealed for a phase 2 of the ongoing negotiations between Israel and Gaza. Now, the US president said the job is not done and added that the dead have not been returned as promised. As of now, major uncertainties remain as key issues, including when Hamas will return the bodies of all hostages believed dead, and Israel's demand that a weakened Hamas should disarm. These core issues, they still remain unresolved.
The US Supreme Court seems ready to roll back Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, a major rule that for over 50 years has helped stop racial discrimination in voting. Justices appeared open in striking down a newly drawn majority. Black congressional district in Louisiana arguing it relies too much on race. Critics warn this could weaken protections for minority voters and shift political power in many southern states.
To root out racial discrimination in voting. Such an outcome could boost Republican electoral chances across the South and in the closely contested House of Representatives. After 2.5 hours of arguments, the court's 6 conservative justices each seemed ready to strike down a congressional district in Louisiana that was drawn to elect or to give black voters in that district a chance to elect a candidate of their choosing. The court's 3 liberal justices tried to keep the focus on the work that the Voting Rights Act has done in combating discrimination. Justice Sonia Sotomayor told a lawyer for the Trump administration that the administration's bottom line seemed to be to want to get rid of the provision of the act known as Section 2. The lawyer, Hashim Mopan of the Justice Department, told the justice that that was not the administration's intent. A ruling that strikes down the Louisiana congressional district could free lawmakers across the South and indeed across the country to redraw electoral districts from Congress on down in a way that eliminates black and Latino majorities. Those districts have tended to favor Democrats, and it could really improve the Republicans' chances in the House of Representatives, where there's a narrow Republican majority. The decision is expected to root out racial discrimination in voting. Such an outcome could boost Republican electoral chances across the South and in the closely contested House of Representatives. After 2.5 hours of arguments, the court's 6 conservative justices each seemed ready to strike down a congressional district in Louisiana that was drawn to elect or to give black voters in that district a chance to elect a candidate of their choosing. The court's 3 liberal justices tried to keep the focus on the work that the Voting Rights Act has done in combating discrimination. Justice Sonia Sotomayor told a lawyer for the Trump administration that the administration's bottom line seemed to be to want to get rid of the provision of the act known as Section 2. The lawyer, Hashim Mopan of the Justice Department, told the justice that that was not the administration's intent. A ruling that strikes down the Louisiana
China has firmly defended its continued purchases of Russian oil, calling them legitimate and within the bounds of international law. Responding to mounting pressure from US President Donald Trump, who urged countries to halve fuel imports from Moscow amid Ukraine conflict, Beijing accused Washington of engaging unilateral bullying and economic coercion. The Chinese government emphasized that its energy trade decisions are guided by national interest and condemned US efforts to enforce its policies and other sovereign nations. The statement highlights growing tensions between the two powers over global energy dynamics and geopolitical fallout from the war in Ukraine.
能源合作正当合法。美方的做法是典型的单边霸凌和经济胁迫，严重破坏国际经贸规则，威胁全球产业链、供应链的安全稳定。能源合作正当合法。美方的做法是典型的单边霸凌和经济胁迫，严重破坏国际经贸规则，威胁全球产业链、供应链的安全稳定。能源合作正当合法。美方的做法是典型的单边霸凌和经济胁迫，严重破坏国际经贸规则，威胁全球产业链、供应链的安全稳定。能源合作正当合法。美方的
President William Ruto spoke from State House in Naribori of Raila Odinga died at the age of 80 during a health visit to India. Ruto called Odinga one of Africa's greatest sons and a giant of democracy. He said the country will mourn for 7 days and the Odinga will be given a state funeral.
Of the passing on of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, our former Prime Minister, Kenya's foremost statesman, and one of Africa's greatest sons. Kenya, Africa and the world mourn the passing on of a giant of democracy, a fearless freedom fighter, and a tireless warrior of good nation of the passing on of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga.
Russia continues to hold its position as India's leading crude oil supplier, providing 34% of the country's total oil imports. Despite mounting global sanctions against Moscow and evolving geopolitical pressures, India has sustained robust energy ties with Russia to satisfy its increasing fuel requirements. This strategic partnership underscores India's focus on energy security, even as international dynamics challenge traditional alliances and prompt calls for diversification of supply sources.
Of oil is very beneficial for the Indian economy. Indian government is, as I said, is acting having in mind the interests, the national interests of this country in the first place. And our cooperation in energy is very much in tune of those interests.
Well, Russia accounted for 34% of India's crude imports last month, while Kepler data show that Indian state-run refineries reduced their Russian oil purchases by about 45% between June and September. Private operators' crude imports from Moscow hit a record high last month. Still, the volumes have slipped 10% in the first 8 months of 2025. India's Russian oil imports averaged 1.6 million barrels per day out of the total crude arrivals exceeding 4.5 million BPD. Now that shows private Indian refineries have visibly shrugged off Washington's pressure. They have prioritized discounted Urals crude that offered $2 to $3 per barrel saving against Brent benchmarks. Data shows that Indian refineries have saved an estimated $17 billion through discounted Russian oil purchases. Now a report from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air showed that India spent about $3 billion on buying crude oil from Russia in September. That is 14% less than in August, but India remained the second largest buyer of Russian energy in September, behind China. Now, the trimming of Russian oil imports is negligible, despite US President Donald Trump imposing a 50% tariff on imports from India in August. That included a 25% penalty for buying Russian oil. Washington has been adamant that New Delhi halt their crude purchases from Moscow as a precondition to negotiate a favorable trade deal. However, India has been steadfast about its commitment to maintaining domestic energy security. New Delhi has been procuring Russian oil at a discount, and despite the tariffs, India's growth outlook was upgraded by international bodies including the IMF and the World Bank. The Reserve Bank of India too projected slightly higher economic growth for this year. RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra dismissed jitters over 50% US tariffs. Malhotra said that tariffs are not a matter of huge concern for India's growth.
India is mostly a domestic-driven economy. So while we are impacted, by the higher tariffs, it's not a matter of huge concern. 6.8%, of course, much below our aspirational levels of growth.
In the southern Tunisian city of Capes, protesters rallied to denounce decades of pollution from a nearby chemical factory and environmental neglect. When they marched toward the plant, police fired tear gas. Several people were hurt. Locals say toxic emissions have caused many health problems: breathing trouble, cancer, damage to fishing and marine life. The factory long promised closure has still not happened. In Brussels, US Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte both praised President Donald Trump ahead of high-stakes meeting of defense ministers aimed at rallying military aid for Ukraine. Almost 2 years after President Javier Milei promised to fix Argentina's crisis-plagued economy with austerity and free market reforms, many companies are cutting back operations or closing entirely. Manufacturers are struggling against cheaper imports and rising costs. Some have slashed their workforce. Formal jobs have shrunk by over 220,000 since Millet took office, and more than 15,000 registered employees have shut down.
The Argentine manufacturing sector is suffering from different aspects of the program. One is an opening of imports. An appreciated peso makes imports cheaper. So a lot of consumption goods that were before manufactured in the country are struggling to compete with foreign competition.
Ha permitido que esas importaciones se hagan de forma directa sin pagar ningún tipo de tributo, ni el IVA, ni los aranceles aduaneros, ni los ingresos brutos, bueno, ningún tipo de impuesto. Bueno, si no pagamos impuestos, no le hacemos ningún tipo de control, no respetamos las leyes nacionales o no les controlamos esas leyes nacionales, ni tampoco controlamos el valor al cual vienen esas mercaderías, bueno, eso nos pone en una situación ante las importaciones imposible.
Chief Raoni Metakur, a 93-year-old indigenous leader from Brazil's Kayopo people, told King Charles and St. James Palace he is grateful for the king drawing attention to deforestation in the Amazon. At a circular bioeconomic alliance event, Raoni said he had long awaited this moment. King Charles replied, "We are doing our best."
Muito bom presente.
Eu estava esperando você.
I was waiting for you for a long time.
Fundo preocupou para eles trabalhando.
But very briefly, what I said, it's been a long time of leaders. This is the Betuk, the young chief from 50 years, and this is Pachon, and this is Yabuchi. They are young caciques from the next generation.
But it was taking so long for people to sacrifice, agree on that, which on this side, we have a great young there. So very
Muito bom presente.
Eu estava esperando você.
I was waiting for you for a long time.
Dozens of protesters and police were hurt when a march in Lima turned violent. The protest was a part of nationwide strike just 1 week after Peru's new president took office. Demonstrators are angry about political changes and social issues.
Hundreds of police prevent demonstrators from advancing. A small collective called Resistance Insurgency Movement, or MRK, with small wooden shields, tried to stop the police. Teachers' unions, workers, university students, they marched in the capital and Peru's largest cities, demanding that everyone, all politicians in power, leave now. In some of the largest protests held in months, Peruvians, in part inspired by young Generation Z protests around the world, have defied police repression to come out on the streets. 20-year-old Steven Juarez coordinates the MRK group. With 8 presidents in 9 years, they have spent nearly half their lives living with political upheaval.
It's the same feeling among all Peruvians. Anger, weariness with everything that's happening. We've had enough.
He says they are ready to do anything to topple the government of newly appointed José Geri in office for less than a week.
I'm truly disappointed with the authorities. They don't represent me. I'd like to see all the congressmen and officials go in a total purge.
President Geri is facing at least 5 investigations for corruption and embezzlement. A rape accusation was shelved. The new prime minister faces complaints for sexual misconduct, and the minister of defense for domestic called for calm and said he invites those who feel forgotten to a national dialogue. Stephen and his group here, behind mask and shield, say time is up. They see no other option.
That's all for today. Keep watching CVR English.